Welcome back, everybody. Impeachment inquiries are rare in our history, but we're now apparently in the midst of one. The procedure is laid out by the Constitution, stipulates that the president and other officers of government, quote, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. To analyze what all this means in this rapidly moving situation in D.C., we've asked Seattle University political science professor Marco Lowe to come back to New Day. This is like overwhelming. There's been so much news and so much to ask about. But let's start with the fact that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, came forward and said, yes, we're in an impeachment inquiry, but we were already seeing investigations by the House committees. So what's changed?
So this is a formal act that is laid out in the U.S. Constitution. She has started the impeachment proceedings. She can form a committee or have the relative already established committees find what they think are the crimes and then send them to the House Judiciary Committee. She chose the latter. So they're now doing the investigations and they will send that to House Judiciary, which can vote to send it to the House floor. And if they vote to impeach, then it goes to the Senate for a trial.
So what's different if we actually have an inquiry as opposed to the investigations that were already happening?
You can always investigate on a House or Senate committee anything you want and have some power of subpoena. They can find things, issue reports. They don't trigger impeachment. Impeachment can remove a president, and that is what is different with what happened with Speaker Pelosi.
Okay, so this inquiry, and we're gonna talk about the mechanics of impeachment in a moment. This inquiry was apparently triggered by the whistleblower account that was eventually surfaced. What happened?
There was a conversation in July between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States, and somebody who heard the conversation felt there was a lot of pressure on the president of Ukraine to investigate charges that have really been dismissed even by the original author of the story against former Vice President Biden. They felt there was a quid pro quo going on and that was breaking the law because it was eliciting a third outside country into a U.S. election, which would basically be a donation to the election. That could break the law. They filed the whistleblower complaint that has led to today.
So the DNI this morning was testifying, and he said he did not know for sure whether this should be sent directly to Congress, as every other whistleblower account has been sent, because the subject of it, the president, was not a member of the intelligence community. He also said if it had been a senator, he might not have jurisdiction to send it on to the Congress. That seems like a giant hole in the law someplace.
Well, it has been really the friction between the Trump administration and Congress since the House was retaken by the Democrats. What is executive privilege and what is not? And I think the Constitution is fairly foggy in this area.
I wonder why. Did they mean to be foggy?
I think the Constitution's a beautiful document. It is not perfect. That's why we allow amendments. And this may be one place where it could be tightened up. Okay,
because it was very confusing listening to everybody this morning. I could see, everybody's point of view along these lines because it is not crystal clear. So impeachment. Impeachment is different than being removed from office. Explain the process to us.
Well, impeachment can lead to being removed from office, but it's not quite the same. So you start in the House. Basically, the steps I laid out, the House could then vote yes. You're impeached or indicted is another word that we use more commonly. We think there is enough here to have a trial. Goes to the Senate. The Senate does their own trial. We remember a very dramatic one for President Clinton in the 90s. And they can vote that they didn't find enough evidence. They can vote to censure the president, which is like a slap on the wrist where you can't run for office later, or they can vote to remove the president.
And that's called conviction.
Yes, with a 2/3 majority, a supermajority of the Senate.
Right. So that takes a lot.
It does.
Didn't happen to Bill Clinton. Seems unlikely it would happen if we got that far in this case.
It does. And I have been probably somewhat on the skeptical side of a Senate vote. I will say, if you go back and look at Watergate, both the public and the Senate kind of came along during the investigation and made a different decision than I think people would have predicted at the outset. I'm still skeptical, but these charges are very serious.
And that was going to be my next question. We're hearing a range of opinions about whether this is a thing or not a thing. And what's interesting is that, last night I was able to print out the memo, the summary of the phone call. Now we're going to be able to see the whistleblower report, apparently. You can look for yourself. Is it serious?
I'm not a lawyer, but what is really serious to me is not just the conversation, because when they released, and it's not a transcript, it's sort of this, they massaged it a little bit, but what they released is bad. But when you look at the actual holdback of military aid to a country that desperately needs it, I mean, Russia and their cohort occupy vast portions of eastern Ukraine.
Right.
And you're demanding and sending former Mayor Giuliani to Madrid to meet with Ukrainian officials. And there have been now phone calls revealed by Vice President Pence to Ukrainian officials. There is a much wider discussion trying to initiate an investigation that would then bring negative news and information about the leading contender to run against the president in 2020.
Okay. Now, we're just finding out about some of these things, like the Pence phone calls. We found out this morning that one of the things that concerned the whistleblower was that the notes from this meeting had been moved from their normal storage place to a kind of super secret computer system. And we also found out that there are other conversations that have been moved to that secret situation. Is there any chance we'll see those, or that, as just members of the public, I'm curious, what's up? What are we not knowing that we might need to know?
I don't know. It is concerning that once a whistleblower complaint surfaced, they said, okay, these don't stay here. These stay behind a couple more doors and locks. Now, what is interesting is the Senate Republicans have slightly stepped back from the president since the whistleblower complaint, even acting on things in his agenda separate from Ukraine that would be distancing themselves from him. They are watching the 2020 tea leaves very closely and how this might impact the election. If the Republicans in the Senate lock up in some support on this is an incredibly important issue, we may see more, but it's hard to say right now how they could get those documents if the president did not want to provide them.
The fact that they're there, though, raises this question.
Huge alarms. This goes back to the tapes during the Nixon administration.
That's kind of what I thought, for those of us old enough to remember a little bit about that when that happened at the time. And then one final question. The whistleblower law is there to protect people from being demoted or having retaliation committed against them. How likely do you think it is that this person's identity will actually be able to stay protected?
Very unlikely. I just think the pressure and the political pressure within the White House even to disparage this person, that has been, and this is not just for the Trump White House, but the Trump White House does this a lot. When they find an accuser against them, they dig up everything they can. If they ever said something negative of the president, did their significant other donate to Hillary Clinton's campaign? So there's going to be a lot of pressure to try to find out who this person is.
This is moving so fast. It's really incredible. Thank you for explaining the process, though. That helps us, kind of lock into what we're seeing on the news. Appreciate it. Up next, a fun new round of Hot Topics with our friends from the Wolf Pack. We'll be right back.